But I caution you. One of the things we're doing here is that leadership appears to be now based upon education. And by formal education, I'm not talking about a college degree necessarily. What I am talking about is I'm learning more and more, and I never stopped learning, so I never became obsolete, because the system can't protect me anymore. I read an interesting study as I kind of cramped up flying in an airplane from Los Angeles back here. And we have a lot of concern right now about the whole issue of the economic crisis that we're in, and are we going to bump over to a second one? And I have a long fear that that's possible. But an interesting observation, what caused this? Yeah, everybody has a theory, but one thing that we noticed is that part of what we're doing is as the blue-collar, unionized middle class wages started to lose ground. Now realize that the bottom end of that blue-collar middle class, those people, they were then drilled into the ground wage-wise. Benefits, same thing. But what we attempted to do, and it was well-meaning, is we attempted to at least balance it up by having housing available for people that, in effect, I could have a house, a home. But we created the subpar loans. And so people, in effect, and the government pushed it, and private industry pushed it, made loans to people to have the houses that were well beyond their means if we were just logical. I mean, I found people in Michigan who bought $700,000 homes, who maybe made $30,000 a year with nothing down, no interest, and a balloon that came 5 years from now. We all know what happened. All you have to do, drive around here and see what's gone down. And for people here in Detroit, we know. And it's all over the country. The interesting thing is, the study I read is they did a study of all of the places where there were the highest number of foreclosures on subpar loans. And they did it by zip code. And it correlated perfectly to the people whose incomes have dropped. So what we tried to do here, basically drop them further down. That is still happening. And that is this whole thing about part of what we're doing here is this leads to hopefully employing people in good jobs, making certain that they're sustained in those good jobs, that we understand a little bit about why maybe some people lost jobs and how we might prevent that if possible. That's what this is all about, is to get that message through. And part of it is my history, and my history tells me that I have to pursue continuing to learn. And if I do, then I will at least have a chance. So I want you to visualize that you're in Los Angeles, we're in Boston, and we're in Detroit. And here we have tinsmiths. Now, please understand, this was made by a unionized tinsmith, a guild member, a craftsman at the turn of the century in Detroit, Los Angeles, or in Boston. With that thought in mind, let's shoot over one page. This is a list of examples of the types of skilled crafts. Now remember, when I look at a silversmith, I'm looking at an employer who sells silver. So they didn't sell other things. They didn't sell trinkets. They sold silver utensils, usable things that I could use in my daily life. What did coopers do? They made barrels, things that held wine, if we're in Los Angeles, beer, if we're in Boston. If I happen to be here in Detroit and in the suburbs, which didn't used to exist, we had a lot of farmers, and we had wheat. And so I had to have tools to beat the wheat to get it off. Boom! I said I was going to use it on Rich, but not really. A handmade tool. That is a wheat thrasher.
So you bang it and all the wheat falls off?
Mm-hmm. And you put it on a mat, and then you just pick the seed and you shake the mat in there. I want to have a book. This is a handmade book. This one is not that old, but it was handmade at Colonial Williamsburg. But that was on the East Coast. Now, have to tell you a funny story about a potter. This is a piece of pottery. We don't know how old this is. It was made in South Carolina. Funny story. We have some what we call face jugs in North Carolina, and these were well, not for moonshine. So let's put the Boston thing out, okay? And New Jersey, that was your moonshine. Huh? Yeah. But we had something called face jugs, and 150 years ago, they'd make jugs like this that they actually carried water and booze and whatever else, and they had faces on them. Now, this is special because for my carpenter friends, I always obviously got a blacksmith, and these are actually, and you will see this tomorrow at Greenfield Village, these are actually, were made by a blacksmith. They're actual nails, and if you look at them versus a regular nail, and it's interesting about when we look at these in today's, in a sense of a modern nail, we'd say this is crude. But what is considered crude is now worth a lot of money because it is art. And so the blemishes and whatever are now something worthwhile. So what used to be the craft now in today's world is simply art. That's it. So when I think about all of these crafts, I obviously have blacksmiths, I have bookbinders, you have a book. I have printers, you'll see those this afternoon. Millers, you'll see one of those, make grain or make flour out of it. There is one I want you to look at very carefully. There's a weaver there. And there is a weaving machine at Greenfield Village, which I'm trying to remember, was it in the 1700s that was developed, that has the cards in it? Do you guys remember? 17 something. And if you look at the IBM punch cards that they used for the first computers, that's where they came from for this damn weaving machine. It was made a couple of hundred years ago. So things come through time. Now where is that? Service. Where is it? Data. A weaving machine. But the concept was then used to store data, transmit data, and whatever. What is the difference between a tailor and a seamstress? A tailor was a guy and a seamstress. Thank you. Have you ever met a male a female tailor?
No.
To my knowledge, I think there are, in Michigan, I at least have tracked down 2 of them. Why?
Because they deal with men's clothes.
I'm sorry?
Tailors deal with men's suits and clothes.
In part, I'm going to add that to your box with ties. The difference between a tailor and a seamstress is the collar. And putting the collar on a suit, be it a woman's suit or a man's suit, is very, very technical. And the male tailors would never apprentice a female seamstress to become a female tailor. They wouldn't teach them how to do this. And how that started to break itself up is as suits were made by machines and whatever. And so this is a piece of our history. The female tailors that I've met were apprenticed by men who decided it was time. There's one in Jackson, Michigan, for whatever it's worth. There probably are. Look around you when you go home and ask yourself the question, are there any so-called female tailors? Where are they? And this is what's happened through time. Now, I'm also reminded, as I showed you the nail, that what was in effect useful has now become an art form. So everything that's set on this table is, in effect, now art. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to turn over a page to page 8, and I want to talk about the union structure that went with these small businesses and with these particular crafts that are sitting right here in front of you. I want you to continue to think Los Angeles, Boston, and Detroit. In every one of those 3 cities, these types of crafts, and there were businesses attached to them, okay? So if you look at my information box, workers are organized into craft unions according to their particular skill. There was no such thing as multi-skilled. There were no multi-skilled unions or multi-task things, which we take for granted today. One skill, one union. If I was a glassblower, that's the union I belonged to, and that's the kind of organization that I, in effect, worked for. Now, when I look at that, I look at power and leadership of the unions were at the bottom. Why? Because they were organized around local markets. There was no such thing as global trade. There was global trade, but not that affected our craftspeople.